The sound of Maggie's laughter at 2 in the morning wasn't what woke me. It was the fact that she was trying to muffle it with a pillow while whispering into her phone like a teenager hiding from her parents. I lay there in our king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling of our oceanfront home that I'd built with my own hands, listening to my wife of 12 years giggle like she hadn't done with me in years. The moonlight streaming through our floor-to-ceiling windows cast shadows across the room, and I could see her silhouette hunched over her phone on the balcony. "Victor, you're terrible," she whispered, but her voice carried on the ocean breeze. What if Ethan hears? Victor, her boss at the luxury real estate firm, the millionaire with the perfect teeth and the offshore accounts who treated everyone like they were beneath him. The man who'd been keeping my wife at the office until midnight for urgent client calls 3 times a week for the past 2 months. I'm Ethan Miles, 44 years old, and I've built half the high-end homes in this coastal Maine town. I know the sound of something rotting behind expensive facades. I've torn down enough pretty walls to know what structural damage looks like. "He's just a starter pack husband," came Victor's voice through the speaker, loud enough for me to hear every word. "I'm the upgrade, baby." The laughter that followed, not just Maggie's, but other voices too, hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. A group video call. My humiliation was apparently group entertainment. "Oh my God, Victor, you can't say things like that." Sloane's voice chimed in. Sloane, Maggie's best friend and the queen bee of their social circle. "But honestly, Maggie, you've been glowing lately. Ethan's been so ordinary." More laughter, more voices agreeing, more of my marriage being dissected for sport. I slipped out of bed and moved to the window. Our neighbor, Mrs. Dorsey, was at her kitchen window across the way, probably making her nightly tea. The old woman had binoculars permanently stationed on her windowsill. The neighborhood watch committee of 1. She saw everything, remembered everything, and had no filter when it came to sharing what she knew. "The contractor husband," another voice said. "Caleb from Victor's office." "Does he even know what Prada is?" "He thinks fine dining is Red Lobster," Maggie said. And the group erupted again. I'd taken her to Lerner Dan, New York for our anniversary last month. Spent $2,000 on a weekend that she'd complained about because the hotel thread count wasn't high enough. But sure, Red Lobster. "When are you going to dump the dead weight?" Victor asked. "I've got that penthouse ready for you. Ocean views, infinity pool, and a man who can actually afford your lifestyle." "Soon," Maggie whispered. "I just need to figure out the finances." He's got everything tied up in those construction accounts and investments. The prenup was minimal. My prenup, the one I'd signed because I loved her and trusted her and thought she felt the same way. The one that left her entitled to half of everything I'd built from nothing. I grabbed my laptop from the nightstand and opened it quietly. Maggie's email was still logged in from when she'd used it earlier. Her group chat with Sloane, Caleb, and 3 other women from her office was right there on the screen. Victor's message from earlier that day. "He's just a starter pack husband. I'm the upgrade. Can't wait to trade up with you, beautiful." The responses were worse than what I'd heard tonight. Photos of me at the grocery store with commentary about my blue-collar aesthetic. Screenshots of my LinkedIn with laughing emojis. A detailed discussion about how to maximize the divorce settlement. Sloane had written, "Make sure you document everything that makes him look bad. Small-town contractor versus international real estate mogul. Judge will see who the real provider is." I closed the laptop and looked out at the ocean. This house, our house, sat on 3 acres of prime oceanfront property. I designed every inch of it from the hand-laid stone foundation to the custom millwork. It was worth $4 million, and it was just one of my assets. My phone buzzed. A text from my childhood friend Ricky, who ran Murphy's Tavern downtown. "Late night, brother? Everything okay?" I texted back. Define. Okay, beer's cold if you need to talk. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. As I passed the balcony, I called out to Maggie. Tell Victor I'll send him a fruit basket for keeping you so late. Wouldn't want him to think I'm ungrateful for all his mentorship. Maggie's face went white. She fumbled with her phone, ending the call quickly. Ethan, I was just working. I know you're always working these days. I left her standing there and drove through the empty streets to Murphy's. The bar was nearly empty, just a few regulars nursing their demons in the dim light. Ricky took one look at my face and poured 2 whizzies. She's cheating, I said without preamble. I figured. Mrs. Dorsey mentioned seeing a silver Porsche in your driveway when you were at the job site last week. Said it stayed for 3 hours. Victor's car in my driveway. In my house. How long have you known? Suspected for a month. Knew for sure when I saw them at the yacht club last weekend. Thought you were out of town. I was. I'd been in Boston meeting with investors for my next project. A $50 million development that would make me one of the wealthiest men in the county. Money that Maggie would be entitled to half of if we divorced. What are you going to do? Ricky asked. I finished my whiskey and stood up. I'm going to give them exactly what they want, which is an upgrade. I drove home as the sun started to rise. Maggie was asleep in our bed, her phone charging on the nightstand. I picked it up and scrolled through her messages. More group chats, more planning, more evidence of my wife's betrayal and her friend's complicity. But I also found something else. Victor's financial information, account numbers, investment details, information that a careful man like me could use. I made 3 phone calls before Maggie woke up. The first was to my broker, liquidating $94 million investments and moving them to accounts that only I controlled. The second was to my real estate agent, listing our beach house, the one Maggie loved most, for immediate sale. The third was to Moira Flanagan, the best paralegal in the state and a woman who specialized in finding things that powerful men preferred to keep hidden. By the time Maggie came downstairs for her morning coffee, I was sitting at our kitchen island with a cup of my own and a folder full of documents. Good morning, sweetheart, I said. Sleep well? Fine, she said, not meeting my eyes. You were up early? Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about upgrades. She froze with her coffee cup halfway to her lips. Funny thing about upgrades, I continued. Sometimes you think you're getting something better, but you end up with a cheap knockoff that breaks down the moment you need it most. My phone buzzed with a text from my real estate agent. Beach house already has 3 offers. Bidding war started. I smiled and showed Maggie the screen. Looks like someone's going to get upgraded to homeless. Maggie's face went through several shades of pale as she read the text message. Ethan, what did you do? I'm giving you what you want. Freedom to pursue your career advancement opportunities. She sat down her coffee cup with shaking hands. You can't sell the beach house. That's my house. My name on the deed. My money that built it. I stood up and straightened my tie. I have a meeting at your office this morning. Thought I'd surprise you. The drive to Prestige Properties took 15 minutes through the winding coastal roads. Maggie followed in her BMW, probably calling Victor to warn him. I parked my truck, a custom Ford F-150 that cost more than most people's cars, but looked like a contractor's vehicle, right next to Victor's silver Porsche. The office was a glass and steel monument to access all marble floors and modern art that cost more than most people's houses. Victor had spared no expense in creating a temple to his own ego. I walked in wearing my best suit, custom-tailored Italian wool, the kind of thing that whispered money instead of screaming it. The receptionist, a young woman named Tiffany, who'd always been polite to me, looked surprised. Mr. Miles, are you here to see Maggie? Actually, I'm here to see Victor. Business proposition. Victor's office was on the top floor, all floor-to-ceiling windows and imported furniture. He was on a call when I walked in, but he gestured for me to sit. I could hear Maggie's heels clicking rapidly down the hallway. Telling you, the margins on the oceanfront properties are insane, Victor was saying into his phone. These local contractors don't know what they're sitting on. I've got one guy builds these incredible houses, sells them for half what they're worth. No vision for the big picture. He was talking about me to someone else, while I sat in his office, iced through the door, slightly out of breath. Ethan wanted to. It's fine, sweetheart, I said, using the same tone I'd used that morning. Victor and I are just having a chat about vision. Victor ended his call and leaned back in his leather chair. He was handsome in that artificial way that money could buy. Perfect teeth, perfect hair, perfect tan. Everything about him screamed expensive and hollow. Ethan, good to see you. Maggie's told me so much about your projects. I'm sure she has. Probably mentioned how I built our entire portfolio from nothing. Started with a hammer and a dream. Now I'm worth more than most small countries' GDP. Victor's smile flickered. Well, that's impressive for local standards. Local standards, right? I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo of my latest project, a $20 million mansion I'd just finished. This local enough for you? Maggie was standing behind Victor's chair now, her hand resting on his shoulder, a casual gesture that spoke volumes. I pulled out my phone and took a photo. What are you doing? Maggie asked, documenting the moment. For my lawyer. The color drained from Victor's face. Your lawyer? Oh, yes. Moira Flanagan. You might know her. She specializes in asset protection and complex relationship situations. I stood up and straightened my jacket. She's very thorough. Finds things that people thought were hidden. I walked to Victor's desk and leaned over it close enough to smell his expensive cologne. She's particularly good at offshore accounts. Funny how those work, isn't it? All that money sitting in places where the IRS can't see it until someone points them in the right direction. Victor's face went white. You can't what? Can't protect my own assets? Can't investigate my wife's business relationships? I straightened up and smiled. You're right. I'm just a local contractor. What would I know about complex financial arrangements? I headed for the door, then stopped and turned back. Oh, and Victor, you might want to check on your boat. I heard there was some vandalism at the marina last night. Nothing serious, just some fishing line in the intake and maybe some shrimp in the air vents. You know how these coastal towns can be. Full of people who know how to make expensive things smell. The look of horror on his face was worth every penny I'd paid Ricky and his crew to make Victor's yacht uninhabitable. Maggie, I'll see you at home. We have some paperwork to go over. I left them standing there and walked out through the office. Every conversation stopped as I passed. The staff had heard raised voices from Victor's office, and now they were watching the local contractor who just made their boss look like an amateur. Tiffany called out as I reached the elevator. Mr. Miles, I hope everything's okay. Everything's perfect, Tiffany. Just perfect. I drove to Murphy's Tavern and found Ricky restocking the bar for lunch service. He looked up when I walked in, grinning. How'd our fishing expedition go last night? Let's just say Victor's going to need a very expensive cleaning service and a new engine. Ricky laughed and poured me a beer. What's next? Now we wait for Moira to work her magic. Victor's not as clean as he pretends to be. Nobody with that much money and that little conscience ever is. My phone buzzed with a text from Moira. Found what you're looking for. labor violations, unreported income, and some very interesting HR files. Also, he's been skimming from client accounts. Not enough to trigger federal attention, but enough to destroy his reputation. I showed the message to Ricky. And there it is. What about Maggie? Maggie's about to learn what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. I drove home to find a moving truck in my driveway. Maggie was directing two men as they loaded boxes into the truck. Her clothes, her jewelry, her art collection, everything that screamed expensive and useless. Going somewhere? I asked. Victor offered me his guest house until we can work things out. How generous of him. I'm sure he expects nothing in return. She turned to face me, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the woman I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago. Young, ambitious, beautiful, and hungry for something more than small-town life. I'd thought I could give her everything she wanted. Turned out I was wrong. Ethan, this doesn't have to be ugly, doesn't it? You've been planning this for months. You and your friends have been laughing at me, calling me a starter pack, treating our marriage like a joke. You've been sleeping with your boss in our bed, in our house, while I was working to build the life you said you wanted. I pulled out the divorce papers I'd had prepared. So, no, Maggie. This absolutely has to be ugly. She took the papers with trembling hands. The prenup was signed when I was worth $2 million. I'm now worth $96 million. And thanks to some very careful legal work, it's all protected from gold-digging wives and their sugar daddy boyfriends. The moving men had stopped working and were pretending not to listen to our conversation. Mrs. Dorsey was at her window with her binoculars, probably taking notes for her next neighborhood gossip session. You can't do this, Maggie said. I already did. You have 48 hours to respond to the papers. After that, things get complicated. She climbed into her BMW and followed the moving truck out of my driveway. I watched them go, then walked into my house, and poured myself a drink. My phone rang. Victor's number. You bastard, he said without preamble. Victor, how's the boat? You know damn well how the boat is. It's going to cost me $50,000 to fix. Inflation's terrible these days. Everything costs more than you expect. This isn't over. You're absolutely right. It's not. I hung up and called Moira. Time for phase 2. The charity gala is tomorrow night. Perfect timing. Make sure the press gets copies of everything. I want Victor's reputation destroyed before the appetizers are served. Consider it done. I walked out onto my balcony and looked at the ocean. The waves were rough today, crashing against the rocks below with enough force to reshape the coastline. Sometimes destruction was just nature's way of making room for something better. Tomorrow night, Victor and Maggie would learn what an upgrade really looked like. The annual Coastal Charity Gala was the social event of the season where the wealthy gathered to write tax-deductible checks and pretend they cared about the less fortunate. It was held at the yacht club in a ballroom that overlooked the harbor where Victor's boat sat reeking of rotting shrimp. I arrived fashionably late, wearing a tuxedo that cost more than most people's cars. Custom made in London, perfectly tailored. The kind of formal wear that announced serious money without being flashy about it. I'd learned long ago that the truly wealthy never needed to advertise. Their clothes did it for them. The valet recognized my truck and didn't blink. Half the millionaires in town drove vehicles that looked ordinary but cost 6 figures. It was a coastal Maine thing. Stealth wealth was more impressive than obvious displays. Inside, the cream of local society mingled under crystal chandeliers, drinking champagne that cost more per bottle than most people made in a day. I spotted Maggie immediately, draped on Victor's arm like an expensive accessory. She was wearing a red dress I'd never seen before, probably Victor's gift, and diamonds that caught the light like tiny stars. Sloane was holding court near the bar, regaling a group of women with some story that had them all laughing. Caleb lurked nearby, nursing a martini and trying to look important. The entire cast of characters who'd been mocking me in group chats and video calls was assembled in one room. Perfect. I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and made my way through the crowd. Conversations paused as I passed. The local contractor at the fancy party, probably here to fix something. If only they knew. Ethan, the voice belonged to Margaret Whitmore, the yacht club president and old money royalty. How lovely to see you. I was just telling everyone about that magnificent house you built for the Richardsons. Simply stunning work. Thank you, Margaret. It's always a pleasure to create something beautiful for people who appreciate craftsmanship. Are you bidding on anything tonight? The auction has some wonderful pieces. Actually, I'm here to make a presentation. A little thank you to some people who've been instrumental in my recent business decisions. Margaret looked intrigued, but was pulled away by other obligations. I continued through the crowd, nodding to people I knew, ignoring the whispers that followed in my wake. Victor saw me coming, and his face tightened. He whispered something to Maggie, who turned and spotted me across the room. Her expression cycled through surprise, fear, and finally, a forced smile. "Ethan," Victor said as I approached. "Didn't expect to see you here. Wouldn't miss it. This is such an important cause, helping people who've lost everything, giving them a chance to rebuild their lives. Very close to my heart these days." Maggie's grip on Victor's arm tightened. "Ethan, please don't." "Don't what?" "Don't participate in charity. Don't support the community." I smiled and raised my champagne glass. I was actually hoping to make a toast to new beginnings and upgrades. The word hung in the air like a blade. Victor's face went pale and Maggie looked like she might be sick. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called out, my voice carrying across the ballroom. "If I could have your attention for just a moment." The crowd turned toward me, conversations dying as people sensed drama in the air. Margaret looked confused, but gestured for quiet. I wanted to take a moment to thank some very special people who've helped me see things more clearly recently. People who've shown me the true value of loyalty, honesty, and genuine affection. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small wrapped box, the kind that usually held expensive jewelry. Victor Lang, my wife's boss, has been particularly educational. He's taught me so much about business, about relationships, and about the difference between genuine quality and cheap imitations. I handed him the box. "This is for you, Victor. A little token of my appreciation." Victor's hands shook as he unwrapped the gift. Inside was Maggie's wedding ring. The 3-carat diamond I'd had custom designed for our wedding, sitting on top of a USB drive. "The ring seemed appropriate," I said loudly enough for the entire room to hear since Maggie won't be needing it anymore. "And the USB contains some files I thought you'd find interesting. Performance reviews, HR reports, financial records, all the evidence of your mentorship style." Victor stared at the contents of the box like they were radioactive. Around us, the crowd was silent, hanging on every word. "You see," I continued, "Victor's been teaching my wife about upgrades. How some people are just starter packs and others are premium models. How a simple contractor could never compete with a sophisticated businessman." Sloane had her phone out, recording everything. Other people were doing the same. In the age of social media, humiliation was instantly viral. "But here's the thing about upgrades," I said, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "Sometimes what you think is an improvement is actually a downgrade. Sometimes the premium model is just fancy packaging around cheap, defective parts." I pulled out my own phone and opened an audio file. Victor's voice filled the room crystal clear through the yacht club sound system. She's married to a nobody contractor. I'm doing her a favor, taking her off his hands. Plus, she's incredible in bed. Worth every penny I'm spending on her. The gasp from the crowd was audible. Maggie's face went white as paper. Victor lunged for my phone, but I stepped back smoothly. "There's more," I said. Hours of recordings. Victor discussing his various affairs, his plans to hide assets from his wife, his creative bookkeeping methods. All very educational. Victor was backing away now, but there was nowhere to go. The crowd had formed a circle around us, phones recording every moment of his destruction. "The best part," I continued, "is the financial records. Turns out, Victor's been skimming from client accounts for years. Nothing major, just enough to fund his lifestyle and impress married women. The state attorney general is going to find it fascinating reading." "You bastard," Victor snarled, finally finding his voice. "You can't prove any of that, can I?" I gestured to the USB drive in his hand. "Everything's documented. Bank records, email exchanges, witness statements. My paralegal is very thorough." I turned to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the premium upgrade model, Victor Lang, embezzler, adulterer, and all-around fraud. Enjoy your evening." The crowd erupted in whispers and excited chatter. Phones were buzzing as people shared videos and photos. Sloane was live streaming to her social media accounts, her face bright with malicious glee. Victor tried to push through the crowd, but people stepped aside like he was contagious. Maggie followed, her head down, the red dress that had looked so elegant now seeming cheap and desperate. I finished my champagne and headed for the exit. Margaret Whitmore intercepted me near the door. "Ethan, that was quite a presentation. Sometimes the truth needs a stage." "Margaret, will you be all right? This kind of public unpleasantness can be difficult." I smiled and kissed her cheek. "I've never been better. Enjoy the rest of your evening." I walked out into the cool night air and drove home. My phone was buzzing constantly. Texts, calls, social media notifications. The video of Victor's humiliation was already spreading across the internet. At home, I poured myself a scotch and sat on my balcony looking out at the ocean. Mrs. Dorsey's kitchen light was on, and I could see her silhouette at the window, probably on the phone, sharing the gossip of the century. My phone rang. "Ricky, holy brother. It's all over Facebook already. Victor looked like he was going to have a heart attack. Phase 1 complete." "What's Phase 2? I smiled and took a sip of my scotch. "Phase 2 is when they realized tonight was just the appetizer." The next morning brought a storm that matched my mood. Dark clouds rolling in from the Atlantic, wind howling around the house, rain lashing against the windows. I stood in my kitchen drinking coffee and watching the local news coverage of last night's gala. Shocking revelations at the annual Coastal Charity Gala have rocked the local real estate community. Victor Lang, prominent businessman and owner of prestige properties, was publicly accused of embezzlement and adultery by contractor Ethan Miles, whose wife Maggie works for Lang's firm. I turned off the television. The story would run for days, maybe weeks. Social media had made sure of that. Sloane's live stream had been shared thousands of times, and someone had already created memes using Victor's horrified expression. My phone buzzed with a text from Moira. Victor's lawyer called. "They want to meet," I texted back. "Tell them I'm busy, maybe next week." Another text, this one from an unknown number. "You destroyed my life, you psychotic bastard." "This isn't over, Victor. Probably using a burner phone." I screenshot the message and forwarded it to Moira. Threats were useful evidence in court. The doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I could see Sloane standing on my porch, soaked from the rain, her usually perfect hair plastered to her head. She looked like a drowned rat in designer clothes. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. Sloane, rough morning. Ethan, we need to talk about what? Your starring role in last night's entertainment. She pushed past me into the house, dripping water on my hardwood floors. You can't do this to Maggie. She's my best friend. Your best friend who you helped humiliate me for months. The best friend whose affair you encouraged and enabled. I closed the door and leaned against it. That best friend, she made a mistake. She made a choice. Multiple choices. Documented choices that she shared with you in your little gossip circle. I pulled out my phone and opened the group chat screenshots. Would you like me to read some of your contributions? The part where you called me aggressively mediocre was particularly creative. Sloane's face flushed red. We were just venting. Girls talk. You know that girls talk, right? And when girls talk about destroying someone's marriage and stealing their assets, that's just harmless chatter. Maggie's broke. Ethan, Victor fired her this morning. His wife found out about the affair and threatened to divorce him if he didn't cut all ties. Maggie has nothing. Good. The single word hit her like a slap. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Good. Ethan, she's homeless. She's sleeping in her car. She's sleeping in her BMW. There's a difference. And she's not homeless. She chose to leave our house to move in with her boyfriend. Not my problem that her upgrade didn't work out. You're being cruel. I'm being accurate. Maggie made her choices. Now she gets to live with the consequences. Sloane pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of Maggie crying in what looked like a hotel room. Look at her. She's devastated. She looks upset that she got caught. There's a difference. What do you want, Ethan? Money? An apology? What will it take for you to stop this insanity? I walked to the window and looked out at the storm. The wind was strong enough to bend the trees, and white caps covered the harbor. It was the kind of weather that reminded you how small and powerless humans really were. I want justice, Sloane. I want consequences. I want everyone who participated in humiliating me to understand what it feels like to lose everything they care about, including me. I turned back to face her, especially you. You were the ringleader, the one who encouraged Maggie's worst impulses. You fed her ego and her greed and her sense of entitlement. You made this whole thing possible. I was being a supportive friend. You were being a toxic influence who destroyed other people's lives for entertainment. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Victor's office number. "Excuse me," I said to Sloane, then answered. "Ethan Miles." "Mr. Miles, this is Jennifer from Prestige Properties. Mr. Lang asked me to call and inform you that Mrs. Miles is no longer employed with our firm." "I see. Any particular reason?" Mr. Lang felt it was best to restructure the department. How unfortunate for her. I'm sure she'll land on her feet. She's very adaptable. I hung up and smiled at Sloane. Looks like Victor's cutting his losses. You're enjoying this. I'm appreciating the poetry of it. Maggie thought she was trading up to a man with more money and power. Turns out she traded down to a coward who throws her away the moment things get complicated. Sloane was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. She loved you, Ethan. Maybe she lost her way, but she did love you. No, she didn't. She loved my money and my house and my status. She loved the idea of being married to a successful man, but she never loved me. How can you be so sure? I walked to my desk and pulled out a folder. Inside were printed emails, text messages, and photos that Moira had recovered from Maggie's devices. Because people who love you don't spend months planning to destroy you. They don't laugh about your insecurities with their friends. They don't calculate how much money they can steal from you in a divorce. I showed Sloan a text exchange between Maggie and Victor from 3 months ago. He is so clueless. He actually thinks I'm happy with our boring life. Can't wait to be done with this charade. Sloan read the message, and her face crumpled. Oh, Maggie. There are hundreds more plans to hide assets, discussions about how to make me look bad in court, strategies for maximizing her settlement. This wasn't a moment of weakness or mistake. This was a calculated campaign to destroy my life and steal my money. I put the folder back in the desk. So, no, Sloan. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to forgive. And I'm not going to let any of you walk away from this without consequences. What about Victor's wife? She doesn't deserve this. Victor's wife deserves to know the truth about the man she married. Just like I deserve to know the truth about mine. Sloan wiped her eyes and headed for the door. You've changed, Ethan. You used to be kind. I used to be naive. There's a difference. She left without another word, and I watched through the window as she struggled to her car in the storm. Her phone was already out, probably calling Maggie to report on our conversation. I poured another cup of coffee and called Moira. How's the documentation coming? Better than expected. Victor's been sloppy with his digital security. I've got evidence of affairs with at least 6 different women, all employees or clients. His wife's lawyer is going to have a field day. What about the financial irregularities? Enough to trigger a state investigation. He's been skimming from client escrow accounts for years. Never enough to bankrupt anyone, but definitely enough to fund his lifestyle. Timeline. The Attorney General's office should have everything by tomorrow. After that, it's out of our hands. I hung up and walked out onto my covered balcony. The storm was getting worse, with waves crashing against the rocks below my house. In the distance, I could see the yacht club where, last night, I'd begun the systematic destruction of everyone who'd betrayed me. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at the marina in an hour. Come alone. V. Victor wanted a meeting, probably to threaten me or beg me or try to negotiate some kind of truce. He still didn't understand that this wasn't a business deal or a misunderstanding that could be resolved with the right conversation. This was war, and I was winning. I grabbed my rain jacket and headed for the door. Time for the next phase. The marina was nearly deserted in the storm. Just a few die-hard boat owners checking their moorings and securing loose equipment. I found Victor standing at the end of the dock where his yacht was berthed, still reeking of rotting shrimp despite the wind and rain. He looked like hell. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive clothes wrinkled and stained. The man who'd been so confident and condescending just days ago now looked like a cornered animal. Ethan. His voice was probably from screaming at lawyers and accountants all morning. Victor, lovely weather we're having. Cut the, you know why I called you here? I did know, but I wanted to hear him say it. Enlighten me. You've destroyed my life, my business, my marriage, my reputation. All gone because you couldn't handle your wife leaving you for a better man. A better man? I laughed, the sound carrying over the wind. Victor, you're a petty criminal who steals from clients and preys on married women. You're not better than anyone. I gave Maggie things you never could. Sophistication, culture, a real future. You gave her lies and false promises. And the moment things got difficult, you threw her away like garbage, some upgrade. Victor's face was red with rage and humiliation. She means nothing to me. She was just a distraction, a toy. But you You've cost me everything that actually matters. Everything you stole. You mean the money you embezzled? The reputation you built on lies? The marriage you destroyed with your affairs? I didn't take anything from you, Victor. I just revealed what was already there. My wife left me this morning, took the kids and half my assets. The state attorney general's office called an hour ago. They're opening a formal investigation. My business partners are already talking about forcing me out. Sounds like consequences. I hear they're a witch when you're not used to them. Victor stepped closer, his hands clenched into fists. You think you're so smart, don't you? The noble husband getting his revenge on the evil adulterers. But you're just as pathetic as you ever were. Maybe, but I'm pathetic and rich and free. You're pathetic and broke and probably headed to prison. I know which position I prefer. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You just haven't accepted it yet. Victor swung at me then, a wild haymaker that telegraphed itself from a mile away. I stepped aside and let his momentum carry him past me, then grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back. He cried out in pain and stumbled forward. Careful, Victor. Assault charges would just be another problem you don't need. I released him and stepped back. He turned to face me, cradling his twisted arm, his face a mask of rage and humiliation. You destroyed everything, he said, his voice breaking. My family, my business, my future. All because you couldn't let go of a woman who didn't want you. I destroyed nothing. I revealed everything. There's a difference. Maggie loved me. Maggie loved your money and your promises just like she loved mine, until she thought she could do better. You were never special, Victor. You were just convenient. The truth of it hit him like a physical blow. He staggered backward, his face crumpling. She used you, I continued. Just like you used her. Just like you used your wife and your employees and your clients. The only difference is that I'm the one who got tired of being used. Victor was crying now, tears mixing with the rain on his face. What do you want from me? Nothing. You have nothing left to give. Please, there has to be something. There is something. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app. I want you to admit what you did to me, to Maggie, to your wife, to your clients. I want you to confess to everything on record. And if I do, then maybe I don't release the recordings of you bragging about your other affairs. Maybe your wife's divorce attorney doesn't get copies of your offshore account information. Maybe the Attorney General's office doesn't receive detailed documentation of every penny you've stolen over the past 5 years. Victor stared at the phone like it was a loaded gun, which, in a way, it was. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a choice. The same choice you offered me when you decided to destroy my marriage. The only difference is that I'm being honest about it. The storm was getting worse with waves crashing over the dock and soaking us both. In the distance, I could see other people heading for shelter, leaving us alone in the chaos. Victor looked out at his yacht, then back at me. If I do this, if I confess, what happens to Maggie? What happens to Maggie is up to Maggie. She's a grown woman who made her own choices. She can live with the consequences. She's broke, homeless. She has nothing. She has her freedom and her health and her youth. That's more than a lot of people get. Victor was quiet for a long moment. The only sound, the wind and the waves, and the creaking of boats straining against their moorings. Finally, he nodded. Turn on the recorder. I started the app and held the phone between us. State your name and the date. Victor Lang, October 15th. His voice was barely audible over the storm. Louder. Victor Lang, October 15th. I'm making this statement voluntarily, without coercion. Go ahead. Victor took a shaky breath. I've been having an affair with Maggie Miles for 4 months. I encouraged her to leave her husband and promised her a future that I never intended to provide. I used my position as her employer to manipulate her into a sexual relationship. He paused, wiping rain and tears from his face. I've also been embezzling money from client escrow accounts for the past 5 years, small amounts that I didn't think would be noticed. I used the money to fund my lifestyle and impress women like Maggie. How much money? Approximately $200,000 over 5 years. Continue. I've had affairs with multiple employees and clients. I used my position and wealth to pressure women into sexual relationships. I lied to my wife about business trips that were actually vacations with my mistresses. The confession continued for another 10 minutes, Victor detailing years of fraud, adultery, and abuse of power. When he finished, I stopped the recording and put my phone away. There. Are we done? Almost. I pulled out a manila envelope and handed it to him. Divorce papers. Your wife's attorney asked me to deliver them. Victor opened the envelope and read the first page. His face went white. She's asking for everything. She's asking for what she's entitled to, just like I did. This will destroy me completely. You destroyed yourself, Victor. I just documented it. I turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at him. One more thing. If you ever contact me or Maggie again, if you ever threaten either of us or try to interfere in our lives, I'll release everything I have on you. The recordings, the financial documents, the photos, all of it. Do you understand? Victor nodded miserably. Good. Enjoy your yacht. I hear the smell should fade in a few more weeks. I left him standing there in the storm and drove home. The house felt different now. Lighter, cleaner, like a weight had been lifted from every room. I poured myself a scotch and sat in my living room, listening to the storm rage outside. My phone buzzed with a text from Moira. Attorney General's office confirmed they're moving forward with charges. Victor's looking at 5 to 10 years. Another text, this one from Ricky. Heard Victor's wife cleaned out their joint accounts this morning. Left him with about $50 and a maxed-out credit card. I smiled and raised my glass to the empty room. 2 upgrades. The storm continued through the night, but I slept better than I had in months. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was shining and the ocean was calm. Mrs. Dorsey was at her window with her binoculars, probably wondering why I looked so peaceful. My phone rang. Maggie's number. Hello, Maggie. Ethan. Her voice was small, defeated. Can we talk? I think we've said everything we need to say. Please, just 5 minutes. I looked out at the ocean, then at the framed photo on my mantel. Our wedding day, when we were young and stupid and thought love was enough to overcome anything. 5 minutes. Thank you. I'm outside. I walked to the front door and opened it. Maggie was sitting in her BMW, which was packed with boxes and suitcases. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She got out of the car and walked up to the porch. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, normal clothes, not the designer outfits she'd favored lately. She looked younger, more like the woman I'd married. You look terrible, I said. I feel terrible. She sat down on the porch steps, and after a moment I joined her. Victor confessed. I said to everything, the affair, the embezzlement, the other women. It's over, Maggie. All of it. She nodded, tears running down her cheeks. I know. He called me this morning, told me not to contact him again. that his lawyers advised him to cut all ties. Smart lawyers. Ethan, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I need to say it. I'm sorry for all of it. The affair, the lies, the things I said about you. You deserved better. Yes, I did. I don't know what happened to me. I got caught up in the excitement, the feeling of being wanted by someone powerful and wealthy. I forgot what was real and what was important. You forgot that I loved you. No. She turned to look at me, her eyes red with tears. I forgot that I loved you. We sat in silence for a while, watching the waves roll in. It was peaceful, almost like the old days when we'd sit on this same porch and plan our future together. What happens now? She asked. Now you figure out what you want your life to look like without me in it and us. Is there any chance? No. The word was gentle but final. There's no us anymore, Maggie. You made sure of that. She nodded and stood up. I'll send you my new address when I get settled for the divorce papers. Moira will handle everything. It should be quick and clean. Will you be okay? I looked at her, really looked at her for what I knew would be the last time. She was still beautiful, still the woman who'd made me believe in love and partnership and forever. But she was also the woman who'd betrayed everything we'd built together. I'll be fine, Maggie. I always was fine. You just forgot that. She walked back to her car and got in. As she drove away, I saw Mrs. Dorsey at her window, probably wondering if this was the end of the neighborhood's greatest drama. It was. 6 months later, I was sitting in the same spot when a real estate agent called to tell me that our beach house had sold for $6 million, $2 million more than I'd paid for it. Victor was in prison, serving 7 years for embezzlement and fraud. His wife had moved to California with their children and half his remaining assets. Maggie had moved to Boston, where she was working as a receptionist at a small real estate office and living in a studio apartment. According to Mrs. Dorsey, who somehow knew everything about everyone, she was dating a teacher and seemed happy. Sloane had moved away after her husband found out about her role in encouraging Maggie's affair. Apparently, he didn't appreciate his wife's hobby of destroying other people's marriages. As for me, I was building again. New houses, new projects, a new life. I'd learned something valuable from the whole experience. Sometimes the best upgrade is getting rid of the things that were never good for you in the first place. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. It was beautiful and peaceful and mine. All mine. I raised my glass of scotch to the horizon and smiled to new beginnings.